Good afternoon to each and everyone who is watching this video, most especially to my instructor, Mrs. Chris Joy or Miss Buante. Good afternoon, ma'am. So, I am Roel Abamilantik, and task report about the Forerunners of Probation. So, first, we'll define what is Forerunners. So, Forerunners means a person or thing that precedes the coming or development of someone or something else. So, in other term, Forerunners is the predecessor. So, now what is the benefit of the clergy? So, benefit of the clergy, an erring member of the clergy who has been brought to trial may be claimed by the bishop or chaplain on the ground that clergymen are subject to the authority and jurisdiction of ecclesiastical courts. So, ecclesiastical court, also called Christian court or spiritual court, wherein the court has the jurisdiction mainly in spiritual or religious matters. So, here in the benefit of the clergy, the clergyman, such as priests or deacons, that has been brought to trial may be claimed by the bishop or chaplain. So this court deals with the disputes among clerics or with spiritual matters. So if there is an erring members of the society, or erring means who done wrong. So if there are members of the church or in the clergy who have done wrong, so he or she, such as priests or nuns, can be claimed by the bishop or the chaplain, provided that such act of the clergyman could be brought to trial under the custody or jurisdiction of the church. And that's it. That's the benefit of the clergy. So to make it clear, the benefit of the clergy. So the clergymen who have done wrong will be governed by the church and not by the government. So to be governed by the church, not by the government, and exempted to the ordinary civil courts. So if the clergyman who have done wrong, he or she will be governed by the church and not by the ordinary civil courts. So the benefit of the clergy, so there is an exception. There is an exception of the clergymen, such as priests or nuns, to be free or to be governed by the ecclesiastical courts, unlike to the ordinary civil courts. So that is the benefit of the clergy, that there is an exemption of the clerics or the priests or nuns. Next, judicial reprieve. A temporary suspension of the sentence imposed by the court, providing the convicted offender ample time to petition for either absolute or conditional pardon. So in judicial reprieve, a judge could suspend the imposition or execution of a sentence or on condition of good behavior of the part of the offender. So what is reprieve? So reprieve, to postpone or to postpone such punishment. And ample time means enough time to finish something. So to distinguish with the absolute or between conditional pardon. So the absolute pardon means the total extinction of criminal liability of an individual that is granted without any condition. So the absolute pardon, there is the extinction of criminal liability, so there is no criminal liability at all. While the conditional pardon, this means that there will be certain limits imposed and the criminal liability is only partially extinguished. So unlike to the absolute pardon, so the conditional pardon, there are limits being imposed to the criminal. So and the criminal liability itself is partially extinguished. So there is a partial, not unlike to the absolute, that there is a total extinction of punishment or criminal liability. Next, recognizance. An old method of deferring judgment involving an obligation or promise on the part of the offender, sworn under court order not to violate any law in the future, and release is obtained granting that conditions were met. So, the recognizance, a person undertakes before a court or magistrate to observe some condition, especially to appear with someone. So the idea of recognizance also is, this means that there is an obligation or promise in the part of the offender wherein his release depends on or relies if the conditions are being met. So here in recognizance, the criminal or the offender or the criminal or the offender rather was being granted a conditions. So for instance, if a criminal if an offender was being met or he has being met the conditions being given by the court, so he shall be released if the conditions was being met. So here in recognizance, the offender was giving a condition. So for instance, the offender was being sworn under the court not to violate any law in the future. So here in recognizance, the criminal or the offender was given a condition that he or she will not violate any law in the future. So if that condition was being met, then there is a possibility or an instance that he or she will be released. So that is for me the idea of recognizance. Next, transportation. Transportation refers to the old practice of exile or banishment. Colonists who have benefited from this method of dispensing with prisoners got cheaper labors as a substitute for a harsh penalty. The continent of Australia and South America were the usual destination for the transported prisoners. So, lastly, transportation. So, transportation, the convicted criminals were being transported to the colonies to serve their prison sentences. So, now what's exile or banishment? So, exile means a person who was forced to leave his or her own country as a punishment for committing illegal acts. So, unlike to the commonly observed here in the Philippines that if a person committed a crime, he or she will be in prison. But here in transportation, there is a practice of exile or banishment. So the punishment for the criminal liability of the person, if he or she will be committed a crime, he will be transported to another continent or another place as a form of punishment. So they were transported to Australia and South Africa to help build the young colony. So mostly the destination of the prisoners being transported was the continent of Australia and South America, since they need the help to build build the young colonies. And any criminal with a sentence of 7 years or longer can be transported. So here in transportation, there is a 7 years or longer. So that is the required length of punishment that the prisoner or an offender could be transported to another place. So this is the idea of transportation. So to make it short, the punishment being applied in transportation is exile or banishment, wherein an offender was being forced to leave his or her own country as a punishment. So these are the forerunners of the probation: the benefit of the clergy, the judicial reprieve, recognizance, and transportation.